Hello, and welcome to Adventures of an Autistic. Today, I'm going to be discussing another theory, which is about witches. Um, I'm so funny. All right. Well, I believe that witches may have been autistic women persecuted throughout history, and in today's episode, I'm going to tell you why I think that. So, to start off with, women who were socially distant did not have a male chaperone or a husband. A lot of times, those women were considered to be witches or accused of being witches. Um, that obviously does not make you a witch if you're socially distant. It just means you maybe don't like people. Two, there were a lot of women who had fertility issues in the Middle Ages, and if they couldn't bear children, or if they were in a community and people in the community suffered infertility issues, a lot of times a woman would be accused of being a witch around fertility issues. We now know that there is scientific evidence of there being correlations of women on the autistic spectrum and having infertility issues. Also, men having infertility issues on the autism spectrum. But the fact that fertility was a issue and it being correlated with witches is a point that maybe could be autistic women. I think that, just like a side note, that the fact that autistic women are so undiagnosed and not seen by society. If you take a minute to stop and think about, like, if it is true that autistic women have been called witches and persecuted throughout history, it would make you very much more likely to keep that type of personality traits under wraps, to not discuss them, to find ways to mask your social traits that might make you an outcast. If you're getting called a witch for being socially distant, making sure that you stay a part of the community, forcing yourself to engage, forcing yourself into situations that we all know essentially are not the instinctual what's that word, where an autistic person wants to go necessarily, but forcing themselves out of their comfort zone in order to meet like social structures of like what's appropriate. Um, so I think that's why like autistic women could have been misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, and hidden. The fact that like if you get persecuted for being an autistic woman and burned at the stake, you're gonna hide yourself. So, okay, other issues that autistic women and also witches faced, they have seizures. Witches that would end up in an epileptic state were often being told that they were being possessed by demons, and that gave cause for, accusing them of being witches. So very much just like persons with disabilities. I'm sure people with schizophrenia, um, that kind of thing, where if they had any kind of sensory play that maybe didn't match up with everyone else's like physical reality, they would have probably been accused of being a witch and killed. Chanting. Witches are known for repeating words or chanting sayings. And autistic people also like to verbal stim by repeating the same word or phrases over and over again. Um, just like singing songs, casting spells could have been very much like that whole idea of like repetition, bringing comfort to the autistic person, or someone on the outside who doesn't understand why a person is repeating could just see that as being like a chanty witch. Spinning. Autistic people with proprioception issues love to spin. Or proprioception non-issues? I don't know how you want to say it. People, autistic people do commonly like to spin. And you can kind of have this idea of like how back in the day they would talk about like witches being in nature spinning and like being under the moon and dancing in circles and that kind of stuff. So another point towards that whole correlation, autism, witches, spinning. Speaking of dancing under the moon, nighttime is often known by autistic people to be their hour. They are night owls. It's the witching hour, you know, huge correlation with nighttime and witches. And then also for autistic people, um, what's it called? Dysfunction of the circadian rhythm. Autistic people have a dysfunction of circadian rhythm often. That gives them a lot of trouble sleeping, staying asleep, a lot of insomniacs, that kind of thing. The fact that there were people awake at night when everyone else was sleeping maybe upset the regular neurotypical folks. Maybe they were like, oh, why is she dancing under the moon? Maybe the autistic woman was like, nobody can watch me now because they're all asleep. I'll just go out into the woods, dance, and enjoy my nighttime because I'm awake. Like so often, I am awake. So, yeah, nighttime, having a good time underneath the moon where there was light, you know, in medieval wherever. Yeah, I can understand why an autistic woman would go out in the nighttime to find something to do. You know, they didn't have Facebook back then. Black cats. Everybody knows the black cats and witches correlation. But also, who in the autistic spectrum doesn't know about our affinity with animals, specifically cats? Like, it is heavily predominant that autistic women love cats. The crazy cat lady, I can probably make another video about that trope. Probably also autistic. Like, a woman who wants to be alone surrounded by 10 cats. I don't know, that just kind of screams autistic to me, but, you know, probably should investigate before going making random statements. But yeah, animals, you know, the fact that witches were known to have like familiars and keep animals as like, you know, their spell casting, you know, helpers. I don't know, whatever. Um, yeah, that is. And it's like autistic, losing my train of thought. Yeah, ADHD, totally not a thing. Also wanted to talk about, okay, so the black cats, we'll finish up that one. So like animals, witches, like, I think really honestly, if we looked for hard evidence of witches doing harm to animals, I think it's gonna be like so much less than what, you know, like is like shown. Like they like to try to say that witches would, you know, take part in acts of like cannibalism of infants. It just sounds disgusting and horrible, but thinking about of like autistic women in history, like would they have participated in that? And I think that they wouldn't participate so much in the cannibalism of infants unless it, you know, was a super annoying baby that wouldn't stop crying like 3 shanties down. Okay, probably not. But just being into like eating different things, chewy things. I could see autistic women enjoying having a chewy sensation to chew on. So maybe eating odd things from their neurotypical peers may have happened. It may have caused, you know, um, their society to take note of them. Very possible. Maybe they were the ones who really enjoyed, you know, eating the intestines of the animal because they were extra chewy. Maybe a good old lung, good heart, real nice chew in there. So maybe, you know, sensory needs. They didn't have jewelry back then. Maybe you just chewed on a chicken heart. I don't know. I'm gonna judge my autistic female ancestors. You know, you do you, boo. You need a chicken heart to get through the day. You do it. Arr. So what else do we got? Visions. People on the autistic spectrum have what's it called? Somatosensory. Don't quote my pronunciation of the words, but autistic women had somatosensory issues. Autistic women have somatosensory issues. We can see things that aren't there. We can hear things that aren't there. We can feel things that aren't there. Our senses are not neurotypical. If you had an experience of hearing something that wasn't there, or seeing something that wasn't there, it would be very understandable for the Middle Ages for people to be confused and maybe think you're a witch. Not great, but I can understand it. There's a point for the medieval people there. Like, if some person's like, I hear things, yeah, I'm gonna be a little caught off guard too. Let's see here. What else do I got? We have socially distant, fertility issues, chanting, spinning, black cats, seizures. I also forgot to mention that there is a type of seizure where you don't actually have any signs of body twitches or shakes. All you have is the fact that you look like you're in a trance. They're called focal seizures, and you just become unresponsive. So somebody going into a trance-like state can very easily just have a seizure disorder, and they aren't communicating with the other world. But if everyone around you is like, you weren't here for the past 10 minutes, where were you? Maybe you would come up with something. Maybe people who have seizures have dreams. I'm not sure. I don't have seizures, and I don't enter focal seizures. So I can't tell you what they experience, and I can't tell you what the people in trances experience. I can just guess that if you did have focal seizures in the medieval times, they would have considered you to be in a trance, and they probably would have killed you for being a witch. The other thing is aggression. So, women who spoke up, acted out, got angry, were labeled as witches. Like anybody who is on the, I think the more the ADHD side, I think that like what we all know that a ton of autistic people also have issues with ADHD, and I've stated before that I believe that ADHD is just like a symptom of hypersensitivity to a ton of things, being emotionally really sensitive. And aggression would definitely be an issue for people who are struggling with emotional regulation. And those women would have gotten labeled a witch if you couldn't control your temper because you were so confused and so hurt and so angry that your society was doing something that was against something you believed in. You could get killed. Like, you couldn't have opinions and be a woman back in the day. That would make you a witch. They estimate in some different sources that there could be up to about roughly 9, let me see if I can see, I don't have the thing, but 9 million people that were killed during witch trials all through history. That's a lot. And there weren't that many men killed for being witches. It was predominantly women. The fact that we have these issues where so much of it is, I was even thinking about it after the fact that I wrote this little document for my university classes, and I've been thinking about it since, and I can still come up with more issues where I'm like, yeah, autism, witches, they jive. But I should leave my pauses in so that it gives like example to the mind of a self-diagnosed autistic person with ADHD. it makes me sad to think that 9 million people could have been persecuted for having autistic traits, for being socially distant, for liking animals, for having seizures, for having trouble with emotional regulation, for having sensory disruption that causes them to see or hear things. It breaks my heart. It also really shows a cause for the reason that women are hidden or were hidden in regards to autism. If you showed female autistic traits, you could be persecuted and you could be killed. As a witch, as an outsider, as somebody who's different, as somebody who doesn't fit in, like how many autistics have been bullied? Never mind called a witch and burned alive. How many autistics have been felt? Sorry, not have been felt. How many autistics have felt cast aside, rejected, unwanted, less than? It would be, I think, a really great place to start for looking at autistic persecution. I think that historians would be doing a great service to the autistic community if they could look for autistic traits and the people persecuted for having autistic traits through society. Again, this all correlates back to my original theory that connective tissue issues are the reason that people are autistic, and that women are predominantly the ones with connective tissue disorders because of our need to produce offspring. We have the higher need to have elastic, stretchy, mobile parts of our bodies. We have to fit a baby through our hips. Gotta stretch. And what happens when that system, when that biological system that keeps our stretchiness in check, what happens when it overreacts? What happens when we're too stretchy? What happens when our knees bend backwards? And what happens when our pubic symphysis did like I think that's why men being autistic show up so much more in the eye of the scientist, that they're like, oh, this man is different from other men. For so long, autism was thought to be a male disorder, and I think it may have been thought of being a male disorder because they didn't see all the correlations that show up with females and autistic traits. We've just been learning and masking and teaching each other for far longer. If your life depends on being social, you sure as shit are gonna teach your girls how to make do with talking about inane bullshit like the weather. Let's have a tea party, and in this tea party, we can play pretend you care. And then maybe you can fly under the radar. Maybe then the men won't persecute you for not wanting to hear about their crap and getting mad at you for getting mad at them and killing you because you dared to say something against their against their wishes. I think that it's a very interesting theory, and I was super excited to hear Yosemite Sam did a YouTube video on pretty much the same kind of idea. And in fact, I think she even referenced the exact same paper that I was reading about the somatosensory issues. I hate that word. But I'm very glad to hear that there are other autistic women who are making these kinds of correlations, and hopefully if enough people speak out about it, we can have some actual like research done into the persecution of autistic women through history. Step 1, believe that autistic women are a thing. Step 2, figure out how to show who they were through history. Loud women, women who like to spin, who are awake at night, who liked to verbally stim through chanting, reciting, who like to have cats or animals, familiars, women who had seizure issues and infertility issues, all those types likely could fall in that realm of persecuted women with very likely to have autistic traits. I would love to hear from anybody who has any information or any good research articles that would pertain to this uh, theory. Very excited to hear anybody's thoughts. Definitely, you can tell me if I'm wrong, point me to the information. I would love to know. It's just where my mind has been wandering over this Halloween season. So I hope that you guys found that enjoyable. I am going to try to post more videos in regards to these, thoughts that are just clunking around in my head, and hopefully you guys enjoy them and can relate some information to me and relate it to your own lives, and hopefully some historians see this and are like, yeah, I totally want to go investigate autistic women being persecuted through history. Look for the non-social ones, maybe. Or the ones spinning in the woods. Yeah, it makes sense now if you think about it. Nighttime? What else would you do? Okay, how many autistic women are watching this being like, what would you do in 1600? Whatever. In where? Like, in Europe? What would you do if you were awake at night? Because your freaking body system couldn't let you go to sleep. You'd probably go and cook shit. That was probably the cauldrons. They probably were making their family suppers or like shit for the week because they were like, well, I'm awake. I might as well frickin' do some stock cooking. Figuring it out. Cauldrons, eh? Just trying to get ahead for the week. Just doing their Sunday meal prep and they get fucking called witches. So, yeah. That's an interesting theory that I have. At least it's interesting to me. Hopefully it was interesting to you. I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.